On the evening of October 12th, at the five-star Serenity Peaks Resort in Aspen, a black man named David Sterling was publicly detained and accused of theft by a front desk clerk. The item in question was a $3 bottle of complimentary infused water. The clerk, Kevin Finch, escalated the situation by threatening to call the police when Mr. Sterling calmly refused to be treated like a criminal. What Kevin Finch did not know, what he could not possibly fathom as he puffed out his chest and wielded his minimal authority, was that the quiet, unassuming man in the gray hoodie and worn jeans was the sole owner of Sterling Hospitality Group, the parent company of the very resort where he worked. This is the story of that encounter. The lobby of the Serenity Peaks Resort was a cathedral of rustic luxury. Towering Douglas fir beams crisscrossed a vaulted ceiling 30 feet high, holding chandeliers crafted from shed elk antlers. A massive stone fireplace, large enough to stand in, crackled with a warm, hypnotic glow that threw dancing shadows across the polished slate floors and plush leather armchairs. The air smelled of pine, burning hickory, and money. David Sterling walked through this space with the quiet ease of a man who belonged everywhere and nowhere. He'd just finished a grueling 4-hour call with his international team in a small, tucked-away office on the mezzanine level, finalizing the acquisition of a hotel chain in Southeast Asia. He was tired. His flight out wasn't for another few hours, and all he wanted was a moment of peace before heading to the airport. He wore what he always wore when he wasn't in a boardroom: a soft, charcoal gray hoodie, dark denim jeans, and comfortable sneakers. He carried no briefcase, no visible trappings of wealth. To the untrained eye, he could have been anyone. As he passed the front desk, he noticed a large glass dispenser filled with water, artfully infused with cucumber and mint, next to a neat pyramid of branded water bottles. A small, elegant sign read, "Please, enjoy our compliments." He was thirsty. He reached out and took one. That was his crime. From behind the gleaming mahogany counter, Kevin Finch watched. He saw a black man in street clothes, someone who didn't fit his narrow, curated image of a Serenity Peaks guest, casually take something. His mind, a fertile ground for prejudice, had already planted the seed of suspicion. The man hadn't checked in. He hadn't spoken to anyone. He just walked in off the street, it seemed, and took what wasn't his. Kevin's posture straightened, his jaw tightening with a sense of righteous indignation. He was a guardian of this place, a gatekeeper of its prestige. He stepped out from behind the desk, his movements sharp and self-important. "Excuse me, sir," he called out, his voice a little too loud, slicing through the quiet ambience of the lobby. Several guests lounging by the fire glanced over. David stopped and turned, a neutral expression on his face. "Can I help you?" Kevin strode forward, closing the distance. He pointed a rigid finger at the bottle in David's hand. "Are you a guest at this hotel?" The question was an accusation. It wasn't, "Welcome to Serenity Peaks," or "Can I help you find something?" It was a challenge. David's internal weariness deepened, but his expression remained unchanged. He had faced this 1,000 times in 1,000 different forms. "I'm fine, thank you," he replied, his voice even and low. He made a move to walk away. Kevin stepped in his path, blocking him. The clerk was younger, maybe mid-20s, with a smug confidence that only inexperience can truly foster. "I'm going to have to ask you to put that back," Kevin said, his voice hardening. "That water is for registered guests only." Now more heads were turning. A couple sinking into a velvet sofa near the window paused their conversation, their eyes wide. A businessman scrolling on his laptop looked up over his glasses. David looked from Kevin's confrontational face to the sign next to the water dispenser. He then looked back at Kevin. "The sign doesn't say that," he stated simply. It was a fact, not an argument. This calm correction seemed to infuriate Kevin. It was a rejection of his authority. "I know what the sign says. I'm telling you what the policy is," he snapped, his voice rising in volume and pitch. "We have a problem with vagrancy, people just walking in and helping themselves. So unless you can show me a room key, you need to return the hotel property." The words vagrancy and hotel property echoed in the cavernous space. They were designed to humiliate, to classify David as an outsider, a thief. David held the bottle of water loosely in his hand. He could feel the cold condensation on his palm. He met Kevin's gaze directly, his own eyes unblinking. "There's no need for this to escalate," David said, his tone still quiet, but now laced with a steely edge. "I'd like to just go on my way. The only way you're going is out the door, after you put that back," Kevin insisted. He crossed his arms, planting his feet like a low-rent sentinel. "Or we can do this the hard way. I can call security." The threat hung in the air, thick and ugly. Several guests were now openly staring. A young woman sitting alone in an armchair subtly angled her phone, its small black lens now an unblinking witness to the unfolding drama. David saw it. He knew the script. He knew that any reaction, anger, frustration, indignation, would be used against him, twisted into a confirmation of the clerk's initial bias. He would be the angry black man, the one who caused a scene, so he remained a pillar of calm. "You're making a mistake," David said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying more weight than all of Kevin's blustering. A very significant one. This quiet confidence only enraged Kevin further. To him, it was arrogance, the defiance of a man caught red-handed. "Oh, I'm making a mistake? That's funny. You're the one stealing," he sneered, a cruel smirk on his face. "What are you going to do? Report me to your boss? Who do you think you are?" The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. David gave a slow, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He had given the young man an out. He had tried to de-escalate. Now, a line had been crossed. He looked past Kevin, toward the other desk clerk, a young woman who was watching with a horrified, frozen expression. Then he looked at the growing audience of guests. He hadn't wanted this, but Kevin had made it public. The resolution would have to be public, too. "Call security," David said softly. "Or better yet, call your manager. Let's have a real conversation." Kevin's smirk widened. He interpreted the request as a bluff, a final, desperate gambit. "Gladly," he spat, pulling a radio from his belt. "Sarah," he spoke into it, his voice dripping with theatrical urgency. "We have a situation at the front desk. A non-guest is refusing to return stolen property and is becoming belligerent." The word belligerent was a calculated lie, a piece of poison meant to frame the narrative before anyone else could speak. David stood perfectly still, the water bottle still in his hand, a silent testament to the absurdity of the accusation. He waited. He knew the system was about to be tested, and he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that it was about to fail. Sarah, the assistant night manager, arrived in a flurry of nervous energy. She was young, ambitious, and clearly out of her depth. Her eyes darted from Kevin's rigid, self-satisfied posture to David's unnerving calm, and then to the silent, watching guests. Her primary instinct was damage control, which in her mind meant quieting the situation as quickly as possible, and that almost always meant siding with her staff. "What seems to be the problem here?" she asked, her voice a tight knot of corporate politeness. Kevin launched into his version of events, painting David as a hostile intruder. "This man walked in, took a bottle of water, and when I confronted him, he refused to return it. He won't show me a room key, and he's being aggressive." Sarah looked at David, her expression pleading. "Sir, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. If you're not a guest, I'm afraid I have to ask you to leave. We can't have people just taking things." She was trying to be the reasonable one, the mediator, but her words were just a softer version of Kevin's prejudice. She had already accepted the premise, that he was an outsider, that he was in the wrong. "I heard your employee call me belligerent," David said, his voice cutting through her placating tone. "I've done nothing but stand here. I also heard him accuse me of stealing. This," he held up the bottle, "is complimentary. For whom is it complimentary, if not for the people who walk through this lobby?" Sarah faltered, her pre-programmed script failing her. "It's for our guests, sir. It's a courtesy, and you've decided I'm not a guest," David stated. It wasn't a question. "Well," she stammered, "if you could just show us your room key, we could clear this all up." It was the same demand, the same test he had to pass to be seen as legitimate. He was being asked to prove he belonged in a space built on his own vision, funded by his own capital. The indignity of it was a cold, heavy weight. "I will not," David said simply. "Not under duress, and not when I've been accused of a crime. My status as a guest is irrelevant to the way your employee has treated me." Kevin scoffed loudly. "See? He's admitting it. He's not a guest. I'm calling the police." He reached for his phone. "That's enough," David said. His voice didn't rise, but its intensity silenced the lobby. The air crackled. The fire in the hearth seemed to shrink. Everyone, including Kevin with his phone halfway to his ear, froze. Before you make a call that will irrevocably alter the course of your career, David continued, his eyes locked on Kevin, I want your full name. And your employee number. He then turned his gaze to Sarah, who flinched as if struck. And yours as well. I will be filing a formal complaint with corporate headquarters in the morning. The shift was subtle but seismic. He had moved the conflict from a physical space to a corporate one. He was speaking the language of liability, of human resources, of consequences that existed far beyond this lobby. Kevin hesitated, his bravado wavering for the first time. You can't. My name is Kevin Finch, he said defiantly, though a tremor of uncertainty had entered his voice. And I'm just doing my job, Sarah, looking pale, mumbled Sarah Jenkins. Assistant manager, David nodded slowly, memorizing the names. Thank you, Kevin Finch and Sarah Jenkins. You've both been very informative. He then reached into the back pocket of his jeans and pulled out a simple, worn leather wallet. It was not the expensive, brand-name accessory Kevin might have expected. It looked normal. Kevin watched, a sneer returning to his face, expecting a driver's license or perhaps a credit card to be brandished as some form of flimsy identification. Sarah just looked terrified, as if she was only now realizing the ground was unstable beneath her feet. David didn't pull out a room key. He didn't pull out a driver's license. He slid out a single, heavy stock card. It was matte black, with a simple, elegant silver logo embossed on it, a stylized S intertwined with a mountain peak. Below the logo, in minimalist silver font, were just 2 lines. David Sterling, Chairman and CEO, Sterling Hospitality Group. He didn't hand it to Kevin. He held it out to Sarah. Her hand trembled as she took it. She read the card, her eyes widening. She read it again, her brain refusing to process the information. The blood drained from her face, leaving a sickly, pale mask of pure horror. She looked from the card to the man in the gray hoodie, truly seeing him for the first time. The quiet confidence, the unnerving calm, the precise language, it all snapped into focus. She felt a wave of nausea. Kevin, oblivious, let out a short, barking laugh. What's that? A fake ID? Trying to pretend you're somebody? That's pathetic. You're really going all out for a $3 water. But his laughter died in his throat as he saw Sarah's expression. She looked like she had seen a ghost. She was shaking her head, her mouth opening and closing silently as she stared at David. Kevin, she finally whispered, her voice a reedy thread. Stop. Just stop. Stop what? He demanded, his own unease now growing into a cold knot in his stomach. He's a nobody, no, Sarah breathed, holding the business card out for him to see. He's not. Kevin snatched the card from her. He read the name. He read the title. His brain performed the same cognitive gymnastics Sarah's had, trying to find an explanation, a way for this to not be true. Sterling Hospitality Group. David Sterling. The name was on the sign outside. It was on his paycheck. It was the name of the almost mythical founder, the man who had built this empire from a single lodge 2 decades ago. He looked up at David, his face a canvas of disbelief, dawning comprehension, and raw, primal fear. The man in the hoodie was no longer a vagrant. He was God, and Kevin had just accused him of stealing from his own temple. David watched the collapse happen in real time. The arrogant posture deflated, the shoulders slumping. The smug certainty in Kevin's eyes was replaced by a wide, panicked desperation. He looked like a cornered animal. But David wasn't finished. He slid his phone from his pocket, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He swiped the screen and tapped a name in his contacts, putting the call on speaker for everyone to hear. The phone rang once, twice. Mr. Sterling? Is everything all right? A concerned voice answered immediately. The voice was professional, deferential. David's gaze did not leave Kevin's. Richard, hello, David said, his tone casual, as if he were discussing the weather. I'm downstairs in the main lobby of the Aspen property. We seem to be having a significant customer service issue at the front desk. I need you to come down here immediately. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening for a moment. Richard, the general manager of the entire resort, was processing the impossible reality that the owner of the company was on site, unannounced, and in the middle of an issue. Of course, Mr. Sterling. I'm on my way down right now. I'll be there in 2 minutes, the call ended. David slipped his phone back into his pocket. The lobby was so quiet that the crackling of the fire sounded like thunder. The guests who had been watching were now utterly captivated. The young woman with the phone was still recording, her hand steady. Kevin Finch stood frozen, the black business card still clutched in his hand. He looked physically ill, his face clammy and pale. He opened his mouth to speak, to apologize, to beg, but no sound came out. He had built his own gallows with his prejudice, and the executioner had just arrived. Sarah Jenkins was crying silently, tears tracking down her cheeks. She understood that her failure to intervene, her complicity in Kevin's bigotry, had made her an accomplice. The 2 minutes felt like an eternity. Then, a set of double doors behind the reception desk burst open and Richard Powell, the general manager, hurried into the lobby, his tie slightly askew. He was a man in his late 50s, with a distinguished air that was currently shattered by a look of pure panic. His eyes scanned the lobby and found David. A wave of horrified recognition washed over him. "Mr. Sterling," he stammered, rushing forward. "I am so sorry. I had no idea you were on the property. Is everything what happened?" David didn't answer him directly. Instead, he gestured with the water bottle toward Kevin. "Richard, I'd like you to meet your front desk clerk, Kevin Finch." Richard's head snapped toward Kevin, his expression hardening. Kevin looked like he was about to faint. "Mr. Finch here," David continued, his voice devoid of heat but heavy with consequence, "accused me of stealing this bottle of water. He called me a vagrant. He threatened to call the police when I didn't immediately comply with his demands to prove that I belonged here. He became, in his own words to his manager, belligerent when I calmly questioned his authority. Every word was a hammer blow." David recited the events with chilling precision, using Kevin's own language to condemn him. He then turned his cool gaze on the weeping assistant manager. "And Ms. Jenkins, your assistant night manager, did not de-escalate. She did not question her employee's assumptions. She sided with him and repeated his demand that I prove I was a guest, or I would be asked to leave." Richard looked as if he might be sick himself. He was staring at Kevin and Sarah with a mixture of fury and despair. His career was flashing before his eyes. This was the one incident, the nightmare scenario every GM dreads. A catastrophic failure of service happening directly in front of the one person in the world who could end you with a single sentence. "Mr. Sterling, there are no words," Richard sputtered. "This is an unforgivable, unacceptable failure on every level." David held up a hand, silencing him. "There will be time for your apologies later, Richard. Right now, there is time for action." His eyes drilled into Kevin. "Mr. Finch's employment with Sterling Hospitality is terminated. Effective immediately. He is to be escorted off the property. He is not to be given a reference. His final paycheck will be mailed to him." Kevin let out a small, choked gasp. The reality of his situation finally crashed down on him with its full, crushing weight. His job, his future, his reputation, all gone, incinerated in a blaze of his own bigotry. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please, sir, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I didn't know." "That is the entire point," David cut in, his voice dangerously soft. "You didn't know? And because you didn't know who I was, you treated me with suspicion and contempt. You saw a black man in a hoodie, and you saw a criminal. The service you provide, the respect you are required to show, should not be dependent on the perceived net worth of the person standing in front of you. It should be universal. You have failed at the most fundamental requirement of your job and of basic human decency." He then turned to Richard. "Ms. Jenkins is to be placed on administrative leave. She will undergo a comprehensive retraining program focused on implicit bias, de-escalation, and conflict resolution. Her performance will be reviewed by my office personally in 90 days. Whether she remains with this company will depend entirely on what she learns." Sarah sobbed openly now, nodding her head in mute, miserable agreement. David finally looked at the assembled guests, his audience. His expression softened slightly. "To all of you," he said, his voice resonating with authority and sincerity, "I apologize. I am David Sterling, and this is my company. What you witnessed here tonight is not a reflection of the values we strive to uphold. It is a failure, and one I will address personally. No one should ever be made to feel unwelcome or unsafe in one of our properties. Thank you for your patience." He placed the bottle of water on the front desk. His thirst was long gone, replaced by the bitter taste of a victory he never wanted. He turned to his stunned general manager. "Richard, my car will be here in an hour. I'll be in my office. We have a great deal more to discuss." Without another glance at the wreckage of Kevin Finch's career, David Sterling walked away, melting back into the quiet luxury of the hotel he had built, a silent king who had just been forced to remind a fool of who ruled the kingdom. The video, as expected, went viral. The young woman who had recorded it uploaded it with the simple caption, "Racist hotel clerk messes with the wrong guy." By morning, it had millions of views. The story was picked up by major news outlets. The headline, "A satisfying modern-day fable. Hotel clerk fired after accusing billionaire owner of stealing water." The public reaction was a tidal wave of vindication for David and condemnation for Kevin. Comment sections overflowed with praise for David's calm demeanor and righteous fury for the clerk's blatant racism. Kevin Finch became an overnight pariah, his digital footprint a permanent stain. Sterling Hospitality Group's stock dipped for a few hours before rebounding stronger than ever, as the company's swift, decisive action was lauded as a model of corporate responsibility. The next day, a memo from David Sterling was sent to every single employee in his global empire, from housekeepers to regional vice presidents. It recounted the incident in stark, honest terms, without naming Kevin. It was a powerful, personal message about the insidious nature of implicit bias and a reaffirmation of the company's absolute, zero-tolerance policy towards discrimination of any kind. It announced new, mandatory company-wide training programs and the establishment of a new corporate ethics and inclusion department, reporting directly to his office. Sitting on his private jet, flying high above the clouds, David read the news reports and the overwhelmingly positive comments. There was a grim satisfaction in it, but it did not feel like a win. It felt exhausting. Every time this happened, it chipped away a small piece of his faith in the world. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man who had the rare, immense privilege of being able to deliver immediate consequences for an injustice that millions of other black men and women endured every single day without recourse. He had the power to fire the Kevins of the world. But how many more were out there, standing behind other counters, wearing other uniforms, their prejudice a loaded gun waiting for the wrong person, or, in their minds, the right one, to walk through the door? The victory wasn't in firing one man. The real, unending work was in building a world where a man's worth wasn't judged by the color of his skin or the clothes on his back. Looking out the window at the endless expanse of blue, David Sterling knew his work was far from over. The incident at Serenity Peaks was not an ending. It was a reminder, a call to action, and he was in a unique position to answer.